Welcome to the Leader Post Rider Rumblings podcast, episode number 158, and the final episode of the Saskatchewan Roughriders season. Although we're going to continue this Rider Rumblings podcast, but of course, the Saskatchewan Roughriders season did come to an end on the weekend as they lost to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the West Final. Taylor Shire and Darrell Davis are with you to recap the season that was for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and we're going to debate if we think it was a success or a failure under first-year head coach Corey Mace. Darrell.
Well, what do you think? They came a long ways, didn't they, Taylor? That this team is way better than it was a year ago. Obviously, better than it was 2 years ago too. They've gone as far as they could, almost as far as they can go. They stopped one game short. So does that make it a success or a failure? Well, a lot of people think it's a success, but they didn't win the championship. So ultimately, I guess it's not a success. How did you view the season?
I'm going to say success, and because of what you said, they are better than where they were at this point last year. We don't have any uncertainty heading into the offseason. The franchise is in a good spot. They're on their way to becoming a winning team. Whether they're going to be this next dynasty is still obviously to be determined, but that's what they're trying to build. And I feel like they took a step forward this season in terms of building that dynasty. And they have the foundation. Now they're putting up the walls and they're ready to make this not just a flash in the pan type of team where Corey Mace is here for 3 years and wins a championship and goes somewhere else. I feel like this could be a core that is built long term based on what I've been hearing from Garbage Bag Day, the amount of players that want to be here, just the vibe throughout the season, the culture change that Mace was able to construct here. I feel like this is the start of something that could be a long-term, I'm not going to say multiple championship winning team, but maybe down the line they're going to be contending for multiple championships year after year if they keep this core intact.
Yeah, compared to where they were a year ago, the questions aren't as crazy, right? We're still asking personnel, and those are the questions that you ask after seeing how they finish the season in the playoffs. What are they going to do with the quarterback? What are they going to do with the running back, offensive lineman, and some of the changes, potential changes? But that happens to every team every year. Compared to where this team was exactly a year ago, who's going to coach? Is the GM going to stay in place? What type of changes are going to be made? Yes, they're way farther ahead. So I guess looking at it that way, you can say it's a success because they took a huge step forward. They still have another huge step or two to go.
And such a weird year because they started strong and it was like this sort of fairy tale start of, oh, this team is going to be this great team. And then all of a sudden they lose or they don't win in 7 games in a row midway through the season. And the sky wasn't necessarily falling at that point, but things weren't looking good. And it was, okay, maybe this team still has a lot of growing to do. And then they sort of put that stretch together to end the season and then went in against the Lions and beat the Lions in the West semifinal and said, okay, we're here and we're for real. But then they were just outmatched, outplayed. I don't even know if coaching really came into it because I feel like it was just execution by the Bombers, but maybe even outcoached in the West final. They lost 38-22, and I think that score obviously flattered Saskatchewan a little bit because they were really never in it after the Bombers got up 2 touchdowns and the Riders just couldn't respond.
Yeah, strange season indeed with those highs and lows, but credit to them for getting back out of that 7-game winless skid and getting a home playoff game. That's successful in its own right, isn't it? Coach, that last game, I think so, Taylor. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers have been to those situations a lot. They also had an extra week to prepare. And in this case, I think they really took a good close look at the Roughriders and said, what do we have to do? Well, we have to make sure that we hassle Trevor Harris, cover his receivers, or at least cover his receivers because he was throwing into double and triple coverage all night. It seemed like the Blue Bombers did an amazing job. Evan Holm, their defensive back with 4 or 5 knockdowns, pass breakups. So did an amazing job. They could not run at all with A.J. Ouellette, who they used over and over and over again on first down. So you got to question Mark Mueller, the offensive coordinator, about that. Why were they so persistent in that respect? And on defense, Corey Mace himself, who serves as defensive coordinator, questioned his play calling. He ran one full-out blitz, sent the house, and Zach Collaros, the Winnipeg quarterback, had to throw a hurried incompletion because of that. So that reliance on zone defense, the fact that they were able to pick on Amari Henderson, the weakest guy in the Riders secondary, showed that Winnipeg was well prepared, knew exactly what the Bombers were doing, and the Roughriders thought, well, we'll just kind of plod along at the same pace and didn't seem to be prepared for exactly what Winnipeg was going to do. When Kenny Lawler springs open 2 times behind, like for 3 touchdown catches, the Roughriders did something wrong. So that has to be coming down to coaching a little bit. In terms of talent, though, they're probably pretty closely matched teams. I see Saskatchewan kind of on its way up, and Winnipeg, a bit of an older team, on its way down. So they cross paths, but Winnipeg is still the better prepared, better coached team at the moment.
Yeah, I think I predicted pregame that this was going to be sort of the rise of the Riders and the fall of the Bombers crossing at the same time. I think we're still a year away from that now, after Winnipeg showed their dominance, that they are still the kings of the West. And obviously now they have a really good chance in the Grey Cup this week against the Toronto Argonauts, who are starting Nick Arbuckle. But we'll talk about the Grey Cup in a little bit. But first, of course, I guess the big question now heading into the offseason is sort of the future of Trevor Harris. And speaking with him at Garbage Bag Day, he talked about wanting to return, but not knowing if he will return, because it's really up to Jeremy O'Day and company who they decide they want as the quarterback to lead this team into the future in year 2 under Coach Mace.
He's 30. Trevor Harris is 38 at the moment. He'll be 39 next year. 2 knee injuries. He's missed 19 games in the last 2 seasons because of different knee injuries. So he has a good grasp of things. What do you do? He showed he can still play, but do you sign him for 1 year and miss a chance to chase after a quarterback of the future, right? Do you not try to get Vernon Adams Jr.? Do you not try to get Trey Ford or Davis Alexander? There's a few guys around the league who might fit into the Riders' future a little bit better. Is Trevor Harris the quarterback for now or for the future? He's the quarterback for now. Are they trying to win right now? In the CFL, you don't really rebuild. You do find yourself a quarterback, and hopefully he fits into place right away. And Trevor Harris did that. He did everything they asked of him except stay healthy, right? Which, for the amount of money they pay him, that's a lot of games that he missed. He does have it in focus. He realizes it's a business. If you want to keep a guy because of what he means to the team and the way he fits in the community and the leadership qualities, he's the perfect guy. But we've heard how often that it's a horrible business, right? Because you have to throw out the personalities. How effective are you for the football team? That's what it all comes down to. It's not that Trevor Harris isn't a great person or a great leader. It's just, is he worth the money that they are going to have to pay him?
Yeah, and I said it midway through the season, but Trevor Harris, I think, gives this team the best chance to win now. And I still think if they brought him back next year with another year of continuity with Mark Mueller and Corey Mace, I still feel like Trevor Harris would give them the best opportunity to win next year. Even if Vernon Adams is available, I still think Trevor can run this offense and execute it. But who gives them the best chance to win for years down the road, right? When you look at age, when you look at how many years Trevor Harris has left, do you want to miss a chance at signing Vernon Adams and bringing him here, or Trey Ford and bringing him here, and having that quarterback be here for the next 10 years, however long it may be? Or do you want to take another year at Harris, sign him to a 1-year deal and let him come back and see what he can do next year? And then so that's sort of the
what a tough decision.
That's sort of the conundrum, and I don't think we'll find out that decision until maybe free agency, because I don't think Jeremy O'Day is going to rush to sign Trevor Harris. I think it'll be a sort of free agency decision, and Harris might be hanging in the balance to see where the other quarterbacks land before he finds a home. The other option, I guess, would just be come out and say even next month, we're signing Harris and he's our guy and we're going to ride with him, and the amount of confidence that it would give Harris, and they can start planning for next year. And there's no sort of, you're our second and third choice, but here, come back. So it's interesting.
He took a pay cut last year, didn't he, to come back, a little bit of one, and he might have to do it again. I don't know how many other teams would be after him. It seems like most of the teams have a quarterback in place who they can live with, or they don't have to chase anybody, but there might be some quarterbacks available. So how that carousel goes around, it's always fun in the CFL offseason. You've summarized that perfectly. They might decide in their first meetings, you know what, Trevor Harris has done a great job for this franchise. He's got a year left, right? So let's sign him for 1-year extension, keep him for 1 more year. See if we can find a backup. I don't know if Shea Patterson's the answer anymore. For a while, it looked like he was. Maybe he isn't anymore. He did a pretty good job for, fair to middling job anyway when he replaced Trevor Harris. So Tough questions, man. I think that you and I have pretty well capsulized this, exactly what Jeremy O'Day, the general manager, and Corey Mace, head coach, and all the personnel guys on the team are going to have to go through. Is he worth the money? And when do we make that decision? If they let him go to free agency and then pluck somebody or him out of free agency, what does that say about the where you sit with your quarterback, the confidence you have in him if you end up re-signing Trevor Harris? So it's a real conundrum. I got a kick out of when you were talking to Trevor Harris and Garbage Bag Day, saying that I promised myself, this is Trevor Harris, that I wouldn't think about next year, that I wanted to prove myself for this year. And that's probably why, because this is really confusing to figure what they're going to do moving ahead. So the fact that he was able to focus on that and keep his focus, he's really good at that. He did an amazing job in his comeback, but was it good enough? Does he have a future? Oh man, Taylor, we got a tough one, and I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. We can just sit and watch it, but it decides how this team is going to perform next year.
And I think we're going to talk to General Manager Jeremy O'Day next week after the Grey Cup is over and whatnot.
Oh, good. They're finally letting us talk to him.
So, yes, he's apparently going to be available next week. And I don't even know if he knows the answer. I'm sure he has a sort of a gut feeling deep down inside of what he wants to do. I don't think he'll come out and say it, who he wants. And he obviously can't do it can't name names and say, oh, we're targeting X player from a different team. But we're certainly going to ask about Trevor and what the plan is at quarterback. So,
well, say hi to Jeremy O'Day for me.
We might get clarity next week.
I'm staying in BC after the Grey Cup for a week, okay? So tell the general manager I said hello, and I would have liked to have spoken to him last week, except
sure,
whatever.
I will send your best wishes to Mr. O'Day. Okay, so
I'm not boycotting his press conference, just so you know, okay? I'm out of town. You can tell him that too, and send my regards if you'd like. Thanks, Taylor.
So
the reason, sorry, I should just tell if I had requested a conversation and interview with Jeremy O'Day last week, and the Roughriders turned me down. I'm not being bitter about it. I'm just letting you know the status of things because we're joking about it, and I won't be at Jeremy O'Day's press conference next week. So those are the reasons. I just thought I should explain it. That's the way the situation worked out. So
fair. Okay, quarterback aside, when you look at the talent that the Roughriders have set to return next year, already under contract, I feel like this team's in a good spot when it comes to those core pieces that they have coming back for next year. I think Jameer Thurman, the middle linebacker, would be the biggest one that I would go out and sign tomorrow, if possible. But then you look at all the other guys coming back, a bunch along the offensive line, Logan Ferlin, Jamarcus Hardrick returning from injury. That's an interesting one, but he is under contract. Peter Godber said he wants to be back, and I fully expect the Riders to reach a deal with him if it makes sense. And then defensively, Roland Milligan and CJ Rivas are coming back. The biggest question, I guess, would be the defensive line. They don't really have many big returning players along the defensive line. But when you look at the other core pieces, and AJ Ouellette is under contract for next year. So when you look at those core pieces, aside from your middle linebacker and your starting quarterback, this team is in a good spot as they head into the offseason.
Would you keep AJ Ouellette? The amount of money
it's an interesting conundrum, because I don't want to use the cliche, but running backs are a dime a dozen, right? We've heard that time and time again, and even for the Riders to bring in Raquel Armstead, I don't think he'll be back next year necessarily, but
he's not very happy with how the season
ended. Yeah, and he was underused, and I think he took some exception to that, but you can sort of find these guys and plug them in, although are they as good as AJ Ouellette? Probably not. But then when you look at the salary cap and you take sort of the personal side out of it, because he is a fan favorite, right? And he helps generate buzz. Ouellette does.
Is he breaking down, right? He's been in the league a long time, and he runs big and runs tough, but he's not a huge man. So that's one of the things you might have to debate too, right? The other guys you talk about are good. The fact that Logan Ferlin, Roland Milligan, CJ Rivas, key players on this franchise, right? And having them under contract is huge, which especially in a league that is almost exclusively, probably 70% of its players are on one-year contracts now. I'm thinking that maybe 60% anyway. The majority probably are. So you have a lot of transition. You have to lock up those key guys, and they have them locked up. And the other ones are decisions that have to be made. Peter Godber, the offensive Logan Ferland, huge parts of that line. But what a good job they did on building that offensive line. So they evidently find good players, have a good coach for the offensive line, and that might be a transitional all the time type of piece. So, but you make a good point. Jameer Thurman showed he's still a full-fledged CFL player and could plays at an all-star level. There are some other guys dotted throughout the lineup. The receivers, what do you do with all of them? I don't know. It's putting a jigsaw puzzle together in a lot of ways, and I'm sure they'll get started on that the minute the Grey Cup ends. I think you kind of let everything coast. I know the coaches are meeting at it, but the decisions start getting made after Grey Cup ends because everybody's just kind of still in football mode and watching the final, and afterwards, then they'll start sitting down, making these tough decisions on who you keep, who you don't keep.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I didn't even mention the receivers: Schaefer, Baker, MLS, Johnson. Like Dante Myers is under contract. He had a good year despite being injured. I think they're in a good spot when it comes to the receivers. I don't know if they need to go out and I guess that would be an interesting thing. Do you need to go out and sign this big name receiver? I don't know who's available yet, but are you going to bring in a guy, or are you happy?
Get Kenny Lawler.
Yeah, somebody like that, right? Where sort of take the top off. I feel like the Riders do have that talent. I think Sean Bain will be back next year when he's fully recovered from his injury. Can he bounce back after sort of a disappointing season for him? There's a lot of interesting pieces offensively that they'll have to decide, but it does start with the quarterback. That's obviously the most important one. So yes, lots to discuss as we head into the off season. But before we wrap this up, let's talk about the Grey Cup. We got Winnipeg and Toronto, and that's okay. This is another thing that might throw a kink into the off season quarterback plans across the league is Chad Kelly's injury, right? He's going to be out several months, which will likely extend into next season with his broken leg, and he's obviously not starting in the Grey Cup, as well as Nick Arbuckle will start for the Argos against the Bombers on Sunday.
Yeah, we've taken some shots at Chad Kelly for his off-field antics and got him suspended for 9 games at the start of the year for harassing a female coach on the Argonauts. So, we didn't like that. It would have been an embarrassment for him to play, but he's played really well down the stretch. You have to give him credit for that. And I would never, ever wish an injury, especially one that severe, any injury on any player at any time. And it's sad that one of the best players in the league won't be playing in the Grey Cup because Chad Kelly broke a leg late in the East Final while they were beating the reigning Grey Cup champions. So not having him really makes the Toronto Argonauts a different team. Nick Arbuckle has been spurned by half the teams in the CFL and is now the starting quarterback against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Right away, people were reminded of 2007 when Kevin Glenn got hurt for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Ryan Dinwiddie was the backup quarterback. He had to go in and play in the 2007 game against the Roughriders. Didn't play exceptionally well. It was basically Dinwiddie's first start. And now he's the coach of the team that doesn't have its starter. So maybe he knows something that he can pass on to Nick Arbuckle. Arbuckle has experience, though, so they're ahead of the curve on that one. But that just takes such a huge chunk out of not only the Argonauts in terms of talent, but in terms of leadership ability. You could see that the team rallies around Chad Kelly. They know that he's the man. They're not the same team without him. They don't have the same swagger. They don't have the same ability. So and after watching Winnipeg dismantle Saskatchewan, I think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going to win their 3rd Grey Cup in 5 years. Imagine that, 5 straight appearances of the Grey Cup. They win the first 2, lose the second 2, and then get another chance to win the 3rd one out of 5. It's pretty impressive. That's who I would think, just watching the how well the Bombers have gotten since how much better they've improved since the start of the season. We were almost laughing at the Bombers for how bad they started the season. They just kept getting better and better, and I think they're at their best right now, and they're probably the Grey Cup favorites.
Yeah, I think they are the clear Grey Cup favorites. After that slow start, they have been the hottest team down the stretch, and I think they played their best game in the West Final against the Riders. And looked good. Defense, offense, everything looked good. And even with Chad Kelly, I don't think the Argonauts had. Obviously, they have a chance, but I still think Winnipeg would be the clear favorite with Chad Kelly. Without him, I think the Bombers are going to run away with it. just based on all the momentum that Winnipeg has, the talent and whatnot. And as you mentioned, sort of the wind out of the sails when you lose your starting quarterback going into a Grey Cup game. It would take a miracle, and Toronto would have to play their best game defensively, offensively, maybe get a couple breaks and big returns on special teams to have a chance. But based on what I saw in the West Final, I think Winnipeg is just going to shut them down defensively and score some points offensively and use their big time receivers and running back to make it a tough day in the Argos on Sunday.
Yeah, they're pretty strong, aren't they? And their defenses Winnipeg's defense kept getting better and better all season, right? They lose Adam Bighill, their middle linebacker, and just keep finding pieces to put in. The game that Evan Holm had in the secondary, really impressive. Tyrell Ford on the corner, an all-star Canadian corner. A really good, strong showing by Winnipeg. Tough to knock them off the peak. I think they're the team that I'll be watching the closest. I think in Vancouver. I'm going to be there this coming week. We're recording this on the Monday, so I'm going to be there this week, and I'll send you back some stories. Maybe one about the Toronto Argonauts. Maybe one about my old neighbor Patty Neufeld. I don't know. I'll think of some ideas and maybe visit a little bit with Randy Ambrosi, the outgoing commissioner.
Sure. Well, enjoy your week in Vancouver, and we look forward to reading all of your stuff from Grey Cup week. And, of course, enjoy the game on Sunday as well. Darrell?
Thanks, Taylor. You want to do this one more week? Should we try it next week?
Yeah, let's get back next week, and we'll recap the season and all that was in the CFL as we officially head into the offseason, although the Saskatchewan Roughriders started a week earlier than they would have wanted. All right, that'll do it for episode number 158. Darrell, thanks as always for joining, and enjoy Vancouver.
Thanks, Taylor.